This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to Spouses Talking Houses with husband and wife real estate team Jennifer and Brian Frost. Everything you want to know about buying, selling, investing, and owning property. So let's get real about real estate.
To Spouses Talking Houses. I'm Jennifer.
I'm Brian.
And we are in May 2020. We have a wonderful guest with us today, Doug Martin of Keller Williams Commercial and Strategic Auction Alliance. And we're going to get real with Doug about auctions. So, hi, Doug.
Hello. Nice to be here.
We're Zooming, so where is here?
Well, I'm working now from my home office in Sandown.
A beautiful home office it is. So tell us just a little bit about your background in auctions and real estate. We work together, we're friends, and I rely on you guys for tons of collaboration and vice versa.
Thank you. Well, on my real estate business, I'm with KW Commercial Real Estate based in Bedford. I do work out of the Londonderry office. I've been doing it for many years. Myself personally, I just do commercial. My wife handles anything residential in our business. As far as the auction, when I put on my auctioneer hat, I've been doing that since I was a very young man. Started with a family business in New York, grew to my own company out here, and then recently, it's probably been 10 years or so now, we folded it into Strategic Auction Alliance based in Massachusetts. And now we service pretty much up and down the eastern seaboard doing all types of real estate and personal equipment auctions on a fairly regular basis. So I mix my time up basically between the two businesses for, probably 30 years now. So
Yeah, and there's some overlap too between the businesses.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm thrilled to be here and answer any questions. There's always a lot of questions about how it all works and the differences, and actually there's a lot of similarities too.
So we do have some questions for you. Before we get to that, though, I thought we just might talk a little bit about the realtor lifestyle. What have you been up to, Brian?
We've been quite busy. We actually had our first, full-blown COVID parking lot closing yesterday, where we actually started showing this couple houses.
I want to say March 11th.
Yeah, it was probably right the day that they announced the global pandemic, I believe.
Yeah.
And we closed yesterday. We probably showed them 5 or 6 houses. They were ready to buy, and yes. When you think about it, it's kind of amazing, but
it is. So it's not our first parking lot mask and glove closing, but it is our first one where the whole process was through this. And, we worked with Matt, who's been a guest before, with RMS Mortgage, and we worked with Monarch Title. Ken's been a guest before. And the fact that we're used to working with them and they're used to working with us, and we all can do so many things electronically just made it wonderful. Mostly, I just called the buyer up every week and said, "Do you still have a job?" And they kept saying yes.
And did they have to prove it again too?
Oh, yeah.
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 I have to prove I'm essential all the time.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
And I'm not jumping in and out of the car, so I'm not only not using gas, but that's saving, probably a couple of hours each day when you figure that most of the time we're 20 minutes here and then 20 minutes there and then return trip, etc. So I am in the process of stripping and reseasoning a cast iron pan. So there's definitely some weird pandemic things going on here in the house.
What, cleaning?
Cleaning, yes. I cleaned the oven, yes.
Good girl.
What about you, Doug? You've been doing anything fun?
Well, yeah, there's always lots of fun. On the commercial side, on the real estate business, we have seen a slowdown. We are all still doing some transactions and doing some showings, but nowhere near at the level that we were before. A lot of times, and we haven't. Our clients are saying, basically, let me just kind of stand on the curb here and get to the other side of this, and then we will pretty much pick it up again and go. We're getting a lot of calls and inquiries about where we think the commercial business is going over the next several years. And there's a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be sectors that are going to be busy, and there's going to be sectors that aren't going to be as busy as what it is now. We're doing the exact same thing as far as all of the best practices with masks and gloves, and closings are going to be handled the exact same way as what you guys just experienced. And actually, you know what? I like the virtual. I think it works real well to at least get them through a property first, because, then they get an idea as to whether or not, they're going to fit in it.
Yeah, and their time is valuable too.
Absolutely.
When I first started in residential, we mostly showed homes on weekends.
Right.
And over the last, and mostly people would come to the office, they'd get in my car, and then we'd go together. Now things are more, they see everything online first. They're busy. I'm finding most people don't want to spend their entire weekend looking at homes. They would rather, if they work from home or they have any type of flexible schedule, they try to fit in a showing during the week, and we just see one or two houses and we meet there. So, so people want to protect their free time as well.
Yeah, I agree.
I would imagine with commercial, it's going to be quite different. As far as residential real estate goes, everybody needs a roof over their head.
Absolutely.
So there will be some changes, because there's going to be changes in people's lifestyles and their jobs and that sort of thing. But the residential market, pretty much, you can predict there's going to be supply and demand at all times. Whereas with commercial, there could be some vast differences as far as office space or retail space as we get even more accustomed to this virtual world.
Yeah, they're predicting a pretty big change, especially in the retail segment of the commercial industry. 25% of the product that's out there now is probably going to go empty.
The malls, right?
So the retail is going to go. And one of the things with commercial real estate and the retail market, a per person in the United States, we have per capita about 16 square feet of retail space for that person on average. Other places in the world have an average of about 6 to 4. In Canada, it's down to almost 2. So before we even went into this, we had quite a bit more square footage per capita than other parts of the world, and more than what we really needed. And we have been seeing that as we go along now, over the last few years, because now people aren't going to the malls nowhere near the way that they were.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
You mean we don't need a CVS on every corner?
Well, let's
not on every corner. But rest assured, CVS is probably going to stay on almost all the corners.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll have you on another episode to talk a little bit more about commercial. But today I wanted to talk about auctions, because I feel like that is something that a lot of people hear about and they're aware about, but they don't have any firsthand experience. They don't have much firsthand knowledge, and generally have a lot of questions. So, let's just start. What do we typically see for real estate auctions? What types of real estate auctions are there?
There's basically 2 different types of real estate auctions. One is a foreclosure or mortgagee sale, and that is what the people here in New England have been seeing now for the last few recessions. And that is basically the light that the auction industry has become to this market here. The other type of a real estate auction is just a seller's auction. And when that is we're working for either a family or a corporation and just selling the piece of property at auction, as opposed to just a conventional listing. So there's differences in how the whole program works. And I'll be happy to, I can give you a little bit of an overview of how each one of these 2 different auctions would work, and the pros and the cons. So let me start with a mortgagee sale or a foreclosure sale that you see a lot of, especially, many years ago now during the 08, 09, 10, and 11 crisis. An awful lot of that product was a residential market that was out there. The people couldn't pay the bills, and it ended up having to get foreclosed. So the bank takes it back. Now the bank, they don't want to be in the real estate business. They engage us to go ahead and sell it. And hopefully the goal is for us to sell it to a third party. So it comes to market and somebody else comes along and bids enough to get the bank satisfied, and it goes forward. The process, when we are doing like a foreclosure sale or a mortgagee sale, the bank is owed X amount of dollars on it. Now, they do not have to get 100% whole in order to sell it. They have a percentage, and every bank and every situation is a little bit different. But the bank will come up with a number, and if we have somebody there bidding on the third party, and it goes past that, the bank will no longer bid anymore. Their interest is satisfied. And then we just keep selling until we don't have any more money. We're down to one bid. Sometimes it is only one more bid. And at that point, we sell it to the third party. And that party signs a purchase and sale, and they close usually within 30 to 45 days without any contingencies. So the buyer
Doug,
has to be very aware.
Doug, I just want to point out on those mortgagee sales, in other states, for a lender to foreclose, they might go to court.
Yes.
We are not. New Hampshire and I believe Mass are both
Right.
are both auction states, which means that in order for the bank to foreclose and take title, they have to force the sale of the property.
Yeah.
And so they do that by holding the auction.
Right.
And then they may bid on it themselves, or like you said, a third party. So that's something that's just that's forcing the sale on the part of the bank. But the bank doesn't acquire title to the property and fully foreclose on it until the property's sold at that auction, correct?
Correct. Exactly. We are just an agent working in the middle to force that transaction to happen. And in order to do it, you have to either be a licensed auctioneer, a sheriff, or lawyers can do it. But the lawyers, they generally they don't do it. They do their part of the deal, and then they bring in the auction company, because we do some marketing, obviously, to get people there. The buyers, you're buying it sight unseen. You never, very, very seldom ever get inside the property. You do have to do a lot of due diligence to make sure that the liens that are on the property, that you understand them and that you accept them. Some liens, like a mechanic's lien for, not paying the guy to pave your driveway and that type of stuff, that may or may not survive the foreclosure process. So you have to do your due diligence to make sure. Usually the only thing that will survive a foreclosure or a first mortgage foreclosure on a property would be a IRS lien. And so that's your biggest thing. And buyers really, if they need to learn how to read deeds, and if not, engage a law company to do an abstract on it and see what there may be or may not be leaning on that property moving forward. Usually they do a very good job. The lawyers and the auction companies will do a very good job of doing their own so that they can represent it as comfortably as they can to the sellers. To the buyers coming in saying that, this is what's owed. The other things that are going to be owed on the property that may or may not be, that you're going to have to pay, or you may or may not be responsible for, are going to be like condo fees if it's a condominium. Some of those will survive a foreclosure, some of them will not. Usually the other things that are on it are going to be municipality liens. It's going to be water, sewer, and real estate taxes. Those will survive, and you will have to pay those as part of it when you acquire it, because the bank is just foreclosing the mortgage itself.
Yeah, I wouldn't bid on an auctioned property, a foreclosure auction property, unless I had paid an attorney or title company to do a title search.
Yeah.
And so generally the people who go and bid on these properties are willing to spend that money and do it on 5 or 10 auctions a month and know that some they're going to get and some they're not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about, you said you might not get inside, so the property's still occupied?
Sometimes they are occupied, sometimes they are not. When they engage us to go do a foreclosure auction, all we can do is go out and photo the outside of it, and we cannot get inside the building at all. So that's why when you see a foreclosure ad online or something like that, that's why we basically can stand on public ground and photograph it from that point, even though, we will go on, to try to get a picture of the backyard sometimes too. But you have really no idea. Now, if, the people are out of the house and the bank has managed to get the keys somehow, sometimes right before the sale, you can do a quick walkthrough. But most of the time, you will not see it until after you have paid for it and you've accepted it and you've closed on it. And then you get a key that usually doesn't work. And then you have to go back and open it up. And that's going to be, that's going to be a fun day. Okay, well, what do we buy here today?
Well, and you may need to evict the occupants. It might be the owner who's still there, or they might have rented it out, and those poor tenants have been paying their rent, and the owner's not been paying the lender.
And they've got a lease in place.
Yeah.
Now, if they have a lease in place, they have leasehold rights. And it can be a long process to get them out of the property. Usually the properties are empty, but you will and especially if it's a commercial deal and we've got a tenant in there and they're running a business and they've been paying their rent. These guys are not in default. The owner of the building is the one that's in default. So sometimes if you bought a property like that, you may have a tenant in there for the remainder of the lease. If it's a good tenant, it all may work.
Might be a good thing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
There's, if it's
you
a
can
decent
start
tenant,
collecting rent right away. Yeah.
Yeah, when you own the building, the rent does start going to you. So you're the new landlord of the property.
So can I ask you about the auction of that the shopping center in Londonderry that has Shaw's in it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was auctioned off about a year or so ago, and the new owners have been doing a lot of improvements.
Yeah, that was. That property, I was at that auction. I did not conduct it. I was there actually that day wearing my commercial real estate hat. And the lenders bought the building back. They bought it back then, and then they listed it and they sold it to another company, a group of investors. And they came in and they will stabilize that site and improve the looks of it, and it will keep moving forward. It's still a fantastic location in southern New Hampshire. It just needed what it's now receiving is a fresh face and better management. The other ones were way like hands-off management. So
in that case, the bank forced the sale, and then they ended up being the highest bidder.
Yeah.
Because they weren't willing to let it go for whatever the other bids were, or there were no other bids.
There were some bids on that property. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The bank bought it back because they couldn't let it go at the auction. They couldn't let it go for the bid amount under what they had to get for it. The bank bought it back, listed it with a marketing company out of Boston, and sold it for a lot less money than what was offered at auction with somebody else.
Wow.
That was just part of the procedure that they have to go through.
Right.
They can't sell it for $1. Okay. That never happens.
Yeah. I was going to say, sometimes I find when the banks are bidding at the foreclosure auction, the amount they bid is not necessarily what they think the value is, but it's a bookkeeping thing. It's like,
exactly,
we had this loan on the books for this amount of money.
Exactly.
And now we're going to turn it into an asset on the books for this amount of money. And then we're going to sell it for this amount of money. And it's where and how they take their losses.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not foreclosing it because it's worth X amount of dollars. They're foreclosing it purely on the contract, on the mortgage that was signed by the former owners and the banks. They have to stay within certain guidelines to do it, and that's why you see that type of thing happening from time to time. And every institution is different to work with, and every contract's a little bit different. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know the number ahead at all. Sometimes I'm aware of it before I actually do the foreclosure auction. The attorneys, usually it's the bank's attorneys, and I are having communication, and they'll say, we get up to XYZ on this project, we're stepping back. It's going to go, and that will be the first that I hear of it. And then I just do my best to get it there. and all the way past it until there's no more interest. A lot of them in the last few years, because the real estate market has been good, they do sell, and they do sell for more than that, and the banks don't buy them back. As opposed to years ago, the banks were having to buy almost everything back, and then they were listing them or doing another sale and selling them again.
So for most consumers, their experience at an auction is going to be as a buyer or a bidder or an observer. So
Exactly.
if you bid on a real estate auction, and we'll stick with the foreclosure auction since that's the most common right now.
Right.
If you were to bid on a foreclosure auction, what do you expect as a buyer?
As a buyer, okay, so you're interested in 123 Main Street, and it's going to go to foreclosure auction. So you contact the auction company and you get all the information that they're able to provide for you. And we give them everything that we've got, and we follow whatever the attorney gives us. Then you go do your homework on it, you drive by it, and you say, okay, I am interested in making an attempt at purchasing this property. So the day of the sale comes, and 11 o'clock in the morning, you're there. The terms have already stated in the public notices as to what it is. Let's say $25,000 certified funds. You go to the bank, you get a certified check made out to yourself personally. You go to the auction, you go up to the auctioneer or their staff, and you register to get a buyer's number. You prove to them that you do have certified funds or cash or whatever in your hand, and that you are qualified to be a registered bidder. Now, when I open the auction, we do where the legal items need to be read, and then we ask if there's any other questions prior to opening it up. And I only take questions from registered bidders, because I don't need the neighbor up the street asking questions that have nothing to do with it. Okay, so if I'm not sure, and I know obviously, and realistically, 9 times out of 10, you only have 4 or 5 bidders anyway.
Yeah.
So I already know who my players are.
Yeah.
And back a few years ago, there was a group of investors that were following every single one of them. So, I mean, over the years, I mean, I know that is, I can't say it, but I know him. I've sold him
Joe, yeah.
15 properties in the last 6 months, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So now you're a registered bidder, and we start to sell. And it's 100, 110, 120, 130, and we keep on going until there's no more interest, or I've got a bid from the floor, and then the attorney representing the bank will either say the bank bids 210,000, and say I've got 170,000 money on the floor. So okay, we have 210,000 from the lender, looking for 220, looking for 215, looking for 211. It doesn't matter at that point. It doesn't matter at that point. Anything, the bank, that's when, they're all in. They're out at that point, and they're whole enough so that they can sell it to a third party. So now you buy it. You're $215,000 on it. Now you sign a P&S, and you've got 30 to 45 days to come up with the money. There are no contingencies. There are no contingencies for financing. We don't want to hear that you've got to sell your house in order to do this, or anything. You're not.
There's no inspections.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Because we don't know. We don't know. As opposed to a seller sale, we can represent it a little bit differently. But foreclosures, nobody knows. Everybody that's standing there in that room, none of us have any idea what that building is. I've never been inside of it. I've never lived in it. I don't know. I don't know if the roof leaks. So
generally, you're going to make assumptions as a buyer towards the worst case.
You do.
Yeah.
You do. And as you know, one of the most expensive repairs in a home is always going to be the septic system.
Yeah.
And if it's on town water, you're going to have a town water and town sewer. You're going to have a more confident buyer in front of you. Mm-hmm. If the property is only a few years old, they're going to, pretty good chance the septic system is all right. If the property is 50 or 60 years old, the first thing you're going to think of is, I better figure I'm going to have to upgrade that septic system.
Yep.
So, you better go in with your homework done and worst case scenario.
Yeah. And you could walk inside after you get the keys and find out that it's in really nice condition, or it could be full of mold. It could be full of mold and everything's been ripped out.
I've done one. It was up above Lebanon, and it was so full of mold that you couldn't go in the building. I wouldn't go in the building. The people they had to have masks on and boots and gloves and everything just to walk through it for a preview. And I never went in the building. I had no interest in seeing it. I looked at it through the window and I said, yep, by God, it's full of mold.
Yep.
But so these people bought this building dirt cheap. They tore it all apart, cleaned it up. They did great on that deal. They
probably looked at it as just a tear down, and what's the value of the land, and what will it cost to tear it down?
Strip it to the wall, and then they treated the building, made sure it was all done, and then just put it all back together with all brand new product.
So when buyers ask me about buying foreclosures at auctions, I usually recommend, unless they can do no contingencies, that they let the bank buy it back, and then we try to buy it from the bank.
That works.
The old days, I had heard of, you could go up to the bank representative right there at the auction after the bank bid and then say, I want to make you an offer. But in recent decades, it seems to me like there's a whole process where it has to go to the foreclosure department.
Yeah.
They have to make sure that they put it out to the widest market possible, so they know that they've tested the market with that asset, et cetera. Are you seeing anything other than that? Is that just my perspective? Okay.
No, they do have to go through the process, and when I'm done with that sale, and the bank has bought it, they have to take it back to their department. There's a process. At that point, they can go in the building, and or pretty quickly. And then an awful lot of them, as you well know, Jennifer, they're contracted with certain agencies to list that property within a few days that we have this property is coming on. And then you, as a residential agent or a commercial agent or something like that, you're going to represent the bank in selling that product back out to the general public.
Yeah. And then in that case, at least with residential, you can make an offer that's subject to financing, that you're making deposits that are refundable under the normal purchase and sale agreement for certain stipulations. You're doing a title search, and it's got to have clear, marketable, and insurable title, et cetera. So there's a lot more protections if you wait for the bank to own it and then resell it.
Yeah. For the average person, yes, that's a much more comfortable way to do it. But, for the investors that are out there that buy and sell property, they can buy it, and they know the system. They can work it through.
Yeah.
And they're foreclosure deed and sell it.
Yep. They're taking a higher risk, but they're getting it at a much lower purchase price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I really want to know about auctioneer speak, because I've actually seen you do an auction at the KW charity event a couple of years back, and I got to say, it wasn't what I expected.
I didn't understand a word.
And maybe because I had a couple drinks, I didn't maybe understand exactly what you were saying most of the time, but maybe it was just me. So.
Well, I'm asked that all the time, and that's the response that I get all the time is people say, I would never have expected that, you would do that. And as you know, I do automobile sales, and I do that on a regular basis. Right now, we can't get a big crowd of people together, so we're not doing car sales the way that I have been. But and what you're hearing with all of us auctioneers, yes, we do go to school to learn how to do this, and they teach us enough basics and then throw us out into the real world, and we have to, go out and start your auction business. But what you're hearing is we all place a little hum in the very back of our throat. 100 and 100 and a quarter and a 1.5, 75, $200, 2 and a quarter, 2.5, 75, 3. So that's what you are actually hearing. And people are concentrating on, and my chant, everybody's chant is a little bit different. I've always kept my chant pretty much just numbers because I was doing car sales and salvage sales, and I was selling car every 20 seconds. So I didn't have enough time to put anything else into my chant. I had to just stay on numbers, where a lot of other guys will put in bid it at, here it is. They'll put in, I don't know, a lot of different things. And a lot of them are very clever. Some of the best auctioneers I enjoy listening to are tobacco auctioneers and cattle auctioneers. You know, they just develop beautiful, beautiful chants. And there are championship competitions worldwide for different types of auctioneers. And we're blessed, and I'm friends with quite a few of them in the automobile business that are actually world champion automobile auctioneers. And they are wonderful to listen to. You know, they really are. I've never competed. I personally never thought that I was that unique, but you know, I am.
Well, do you have a cowboy hat?
What's that?
Do you have a cowboy hat?
I do, as a matter of fact. And I also have a big, like, straw Panama hat that I was wearing when we were doing estate sales in the Adirondacks many years ago, which we still do. But they would recognize my brother and I's company up there, you know, because I had, like, my Panama hat. And they would know that they were at another Martin and Sons auction then.
Nice.
Oh,
So
that's funny.
so it really isn't. The only thing you want to pay attention to is not all the chatter. Is just, can you follow the numbers? Right. And that's where I'm real clear, because I stay on the numbers real hard. You sell everything in increments of 25, 50, 75, and 100. I don't care if I'm selling $100,000 piece of heavy equipment or a house or anything else. I will do dimes and nickels. You know, where in your world you're always hearing fives and tens, and my worlds are dimes and nickels kind of thing. So, you know.
Okay.
So, is there there must be some sort of psychology behind the patter, the chant that you called it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's times when you run it fast. There's times when you slow it down. You get a real good feel for the bidders, especially like at a real fast moving sale, like an automobile sale. You'll know when they're getting weak and they're not going to buy anymore, and you'll know when they're standing there strong and they're going to keep right on going. So if you've got two of them standing there strong, and it's a wonderful thing, because then the egos get bidding against each other, and sometimes they'll pay more than the product is worth. It's wonderful when it works that way.
Yeah.
We in the business call it ringing the bell, because these guys just weren't going to stop. And then you can just speed up and go as fast as you can. I can cross $1,000 in selling in a matter of probably 8 to 10 seconds.
So you must have to keep a close eye on the bidders then.
I keep an eye on all of them. It's my responsibility not to miss a bid. Yeah.
So that might relate to why are auctioneers licensed?
We are licensed because, and not for doing the foreclosure sales. We have to be licensed to do them. But I am licensed and bonded as an auctioneer, because if I was switching from that to like the personal property sales, grandma passes away, you engage us to sell out the house and the real estate a lot of times too. So we are actually taking possession of all of your money. So we have to be bonded so that the general public has some protection if they didn't get paid, which unfortunately with every business that will happen from time to time. I've never had a complaint. And none of us that I'm affiliated with have ever had a complaint. So that's why we have to be licensed. It's for consumer protection on mostly the estate sales and the private personal property, not the real estate.
So we've got a few more questions for you, but before we continue, I just want to check in with Brian Frost here, sponsored by Real Value Appraisal, and he's going to give us another quick update about the market. It is March 2020.
No, it's May.
Oh, it's May 2020. Close enough.
Close enough.
I've been quarantined since March.
You're in the right letter.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess I'll talk about generally how I'm dealing with this on the appraisal side. Basically, we don't have enough current data right now to really tell what the market has done during the last 6 weeks. We do know that inventories are down significantly. People are choosing to postpone listing their properties, or even some people have taken them off the market because they don't want people in their home during this situation. But I can tell you, so MLS stats from the last 3 days in Rockingham and Hillsborough counties here in New Hampshire, we've had 78 new listings, 63 closed, and 151 under contract.
The buyers are there.
So, I mean, the market is still chugging along here. Maybe not at the pace it was last spring, but the market is still extremely good.
Yeah. And we've been expecting that the buyer pool would shrink for a couple of reasons. One, people not being confident about their jobs. Two, actually losing their jobs. And then three, there's been some tightening of the mortgage credit. So somebody who had a credit score that would have qualified for a loan in March, that M month, may not qualify any longer in May because there's been some tightening of the credit. But we haven't seen that impact on the numbers of contracts being written yet.
No.
There'll likely be a month or two before we have some real numbers to evaluate and really determine what this has done to the market, the housing market anyway.
Yeah. And then I think it was the NAR survey said that buyers are expecting lower prices.
Yeah, I think they said they were expecting a 5% drop in prices. And I don't, as an appraiser, I don't see that right now.
Yeah, we haven't seen the closings that show that. And we're just going to start seeing closings starting this month that were negotiated, financed, and completed since the whole pandemic. So most of what closed in the last 30 days was negotiated all prior to this.
And you would think there's going to be some pent up demand too.
Yeah.
I would imagine a lot.
So we're just like the weathermen. We don't really know.
My crystal ball is broken.
We can point at our charts, but you got to look out the window and see what's actually happening.
Exactly.
Doug, I was curious. So, if a regular seller or some type of real estate owner wanted to hold an auction, and so it wasn't in regards to a foreclosure, right, what might be some reasons and methods for doing that?
For this purpose, just a regular seller's sale.
Yep.
And it works real well in this situation, if especially right now, because there's such a big demand for property that if we can get them all standing there either live at the auction, and then our company can also do it online. We can simulcast it. We can do what we call a TOPS program, which is a transparent offer platform, and you can see everyone's bidding on a piece of property online. You don't get their name and telephone number, but you can see the terms that they are proposing for this, and it's completely transparent to everybody, so that you can comfortably go ahead and bid and know that there's somebody else behind you on this, for $1,000 less or whatever, and they are offering cash, or they are offering it subject to financing or subject to the sale of another house. So that gives you complete transparency as to how you want to bring your bid forward.
So it's almost like eBay, where you see the other.
Well, and this program was actually crafted by my associate Steve, who now lives in Florida. He's incredibly clever with technology. So, and it's kind of works the same way as what the eBay does, but it's a lot more sophisticated. And then when the timing comes down to the end, and say everybody wants to sit there, and it's going to end at noon on Tuesday, and so that at 5 noon you put your other bid in, it automatically kicks the clock out another hour or another 20 minutes, and everybody who's in the game gets a text and gets an email that another bid has come. And this keeps continually going until it's all done. So you can't come in and scalp the last bid at the 11th hour in order to do it.
Well, that's
one of the biggest advantages.
Great fun on eBay, though.
Exactly.
That's a great fun in eBay, thoo.
It is.
The snipe.
Yeah. So Steve has outsmarted us. Yeah.
Yeah. He's done. He's real clever that way. So one of the biggest advantages to it, and what we're seeing, and when we're not doing as many real estate auctions, sellers real estate auctions on residential now as what we have in the past, because you or my wife or any good residential agent, they list these things and they go away in a couple of days, 9 times out of 10 anyway. 13 days on the market, you ladies are getting nervous that we're not doing it right.
It's true.
So
It's true.
with commercial, if I can get rid of it in a year, I'm a happy guy. So, but if you, what we're seeing is like estates. Children have inherited grandma's house. None of them live here. None of them want it. None of them want to go through the expense of fixing it up and doing it. So the executor or executrix of the estate says, let's just sell it at auction. The biggest advantage to that is now he or she has never lived in the house. So they can sell it as is. And the seller gets to set the terms of the sale. I don't want any contingency for financing. You prove to me that you've got the cash to do this, or you don't get a number. There is no stories, okay? And you're buying this property as is. Now, a lot of times we will recommend to the sellers that we at least get a home inspection done by any one of the reputable companies that we all do with. And that's a third-party snapshot of the house. He's going to go through there, and they may miss something, but they're going to go through there and give their best evaluation of what this product is. And we will do an open house on it, and they can go in and they can take a look at it. And they can do all the research, and then the auction is going to be, next, Tuesday at 12 o'clock. And you bring the terms, and you're going to get a copy of the contract that's all up online, and all the terms that you're going to agree to. And then, like with most of these sellers' sales, they pre-register because you don't have to be at the sale to do it. You could be home sitting there, and your neighbor Joe that's bidding on it too doesn't know it because he's standing at the auction live and you're sitting at your computer bidding. Or we can do the tops thing where nobody's there and we just do completely everything online with it. But the best thing about it is we can sell it quickly. We can sell it as is. The seller's in full control of all of the terms. And at the end of the day, we get the same money. We get what the market always tells all of us what the product is worth anyway. Mm-hmm. There is a little bit difference in going into the deal. There is usually some advertising. There definitely is some advertising that the auction company does. The commission structures fluctuate pretty much the same overall at the end of it, but it will cost just a little bit more to do an auction on the property. Not a lot. I mean, a couple $1,000s goes a long way because technology now, we all can just blast emails for pretty much nothing. Bigger foreclosure sales, I have to buy them list, and the lists they're not that expensive. But if it's the house on the lake that Grandma had, and we put a sign on it that we're going to do an auction, that sign will bring all the people to the sale. You can do it. One of the best things is if you have a unique property that is, it's not a 4-bedroom colonial on a cul-de-sac. Okay, that will sell better just conventionally. Okay, if it's a 4-bedroom colonial on a lake, that's a unique property. If it's a 4-bedroom colonial that's sitting on 50 to 75 acres of farmland that Grandma owned that can be redeveloped, that is a good hook. That is a great hook for a real estate auction because we're going to expose it too, and everybody that's interested in the asset as a whole will be bidding on it. And if they call you, Jennifer, and they say, I have this piece of property and I'm really not 100% sure, you as a realtor can say, I have an auctioneer that we should talk to. And you get paid, I get paid, we'll work the deal. And we can offer a co-broke for just another co-broke from any one of the other licensed agents out there anywhere in the world. They'll get a piece of it too. So,
yeah, I mean, if you have a property that might be a horse property or something like that, it's got a lot of outbuildings, it's just not your typical house in a neighborhood. this is also how we can figure out what the value is, because the auction's going to bring you market value, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If it's a little house anywhere within sight of the Atlantic Ocean, by God, the best way to sell that piece of property is at auction, because everybody wants that. I mean, I would buy one.
Yeah.
All of us would love one. I'm sure you would love it if I bought one.
Does the bidder need to bring some sort of a separate check, or is there a separate fee? I've seen on some of the online auctions that there's some sort of a fee that the buyer has to pay.
That is a wonderful question. So what that is a buyer's premium, and yes, we do charge a buyer's premium on some of them. We charge a buyer's premium, and then the seller has to pay less of the fees. So a buyer's premium will be anywhere from 5% to 7.5%. Sometimes it's even 10% on it. So if you bought a piece of property for $100,000 and there's a 5% buyer's premium on it, you don't pay it the day you buy it. You pay it the day you close. And that buyer's premium goes back to the auction company as an additional income to them. Now, we started doing that because it helped lay off some of the cost on the seller. Some of these bigger projects were costing a lot of money in order to advertise correctly and to get the market there. So the seller pays a little bit of it and the buyer pays a little bit of it. But I'll tell you, in the buyer's mind, they're not bidding $100,000 when they put their hand up at that point. They know they're in this thing for 105, so they bid accordingly. You know, if they say I'm not going to be in this property for a penny more than $100,000, they're going to stop at 95. They're going to stop before they get to that point. So the buyers always know that number in their head. It's very common now. And, so that's what that is. That's a buyer's premium, and that goes to the auction company.
What about the tax sales?
Oh, those are great. So there's Strategic is really good at tax sales. So there's two different types of tax sales. You have tax sales, and then you have tax deed sales. And I'm going to go down to the Massachusetts side to explain a tax deed sale. A tax deed sale is somebody loses their property to the town because they don't pay the real estate taxes. The town takes it after 3 years. And say there's $40,000 owed on that property, but the property is worth $200,000. They just didn't pay their taxes. Now the town owns it. So they put it into a tax deed sale. Now investors come to these tax deed sales to buy that. Now they know that that property is worth $200,000, and there's a bunch of them in the room. And now with us, there's a bunch of them online, and they're bidding on that, and they buy that tax deed for, say, $100,000. The town gets the $100,000. Some of it does go back to the person, but the town gets all of their fees, and our fees are taken out of it. And then they don't own the property. There's a right of redemption, for 3 years. So now Mr. Smith comes up with money, and he wants that house back. So he has to go now, and he has to buy the tax deed. So he knows that it sold for $100,000 2 years ago. He has to pay a premium of 16, and a lot of it is 18%. So as an investor, I threw $100,000 at that deal 2 years ago at the tax deed sale. Now this guy comes along, he wants to buy it back. He has to pay me 8% interest for 2 years on that. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Take the house. So that is where a lot of investors, and that it's a little sophisticated. Do some research on it, but it is a good way to do it. They did, Steve and the other guy, Tom, they did a sale in a small town on Western Mass. They had hundreds of properties that the town had owned and never sold. It was a wonderful auction, and the town was floored with the amount of money that they got for them. I wasn't involved in that.
So,
but
So I would think as a buyer of that type of property, though, that you're going to buy that cash, because no lender is going to want to give you a mortgage on something that the former owner can come back and reclaim 2 years later, right?
Yeah, and that's usually a group of pretty sophisticated investors, and they all just kind of pool their money, and then one of them goes out and chases those types of sales. And then you have just a tax sale, and a tax sale, and a lot of these are like in New Hampshire communities where once the town takes it, it belongs to the town.
Yeah.
You go to the sale that day, you buy that piece of property for $100,000, you're going to get a tax deed on it. It's yours. The town, the person has a right of redemption for the same amount of time, but the town doesn't take it and actually physically own it until that right of redemption has completely expired. And I've done one of those. I just did one recently here a couple of years ago locally. So the town sat on this property for 3 years before they could actually take the deed and sell it again. That particular property, I told them, I says, we can do an auction on it, or let me list it.
Yeah. I have occasionally I'll see when I'm looking into records on a property, I'll either see that the taxes only get paid, they go in arrears and then they get paid once every 2 or 3 years.
The oldest one.
Or I've seen that the town has filed something at the registry of deeds and then there's a redemption, and I don't run into it often, but I do see it occasionally.
Yeah, that's what you're seeing. Yeah, they'll pay the oldest tax bill. And then the process goes on for another year or whatever.
Yeah, it starts all over again. So
the town doesn't want to take the property. They always want to work it out.
They just rather get the taxes. Yeah,
they're due their taxes. We have to pay our taxes.
And if the property has a conventional mortgage loan on it, the mortgage company will keep paying the taxes even if the homeowner's not, because the mortgage company does not want to see the town take the property away. It's collateral for the loan.
Right.
Yeah. Any other things you want our listeners to know about auctions?
No, I think we've done a pretty good job. The personal properties. Personal property, like the best way to describe it is I see it on the commercial side. They've sold the building, and the building's full of equipment. So we got to sell off all of the equipment. Those type of auctions, we now have the capacity to do, photograph them, put them up online. We can actually go in the building and do a walk auction, put a tag on it, and we put a buyer on it and crowd the place with people. I don't know when we're going to get to do one of them again. and then we go up and down the line, and everybody has a great time. And there's a guy outside selling hot dogs, and the office is over there. Go get a number, pay for the thing. If it breaks, I don't want to hear it. Get it out of here tomorrow. Those are a blast.
All right.
So it can be done the same way with furnishings. The thing that I'm hearing a lot now, and I know a lot now with furnishings, is it isn't worth anything. Use furniture unless it's really, really unique. And if you've got something that's really, really unique, don't hesitate to call me, because I can go look at it and tell you if it is. Because not everybody has that same piece that the Antique Roadshow does, but everybody has something they think is the same up in the attic. Those things, the personal property stuff like that, and you'll pay a commission on something like that for the sale. You'll pay the auction house anywhere from 25 to 30 to 40% of whatever it sells for in order to handle the transaction. Obviously, the cheaper things cost you a lot more. If it's $150,000 antique, we'll work a little cheaper on that one, obviously, because there's things in it. But there's a lot of gold nuggets, especially here in New England. The business that my brother owns up in New York that I work a lot with is up in the Adirondacks, and it's just incredible. Some of the beautiful stuff that is just stuffed in barns. We did a sale one day. The barn was so big you couldn't get to the back room. It was the second day of the sale. We finally got to the back room and opened it up, and that's where the really good old furniture was, and we had no idea until we opened it up. They're dragging it out, I'm identifying it, and my brother's selling it. It was a lot of money going around that day. It was a fun day.
That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So we're going to have information for listeners and viewers of the podcast and how to get in touch with you. And then I also am just going to put a shout out right now. Anybody who has a unique property that is on the ocean or on a mountaintop or has some horse property or outbuildings or what have you, Brian and I will bring Doug in, and the three of us will get the property sold for you. So I want to thank you so much, Doug, for being our guest on Spouses Talking Houses and getting real about auctions. We ask anybody who enjoys the show to please like, subscribe, and share, and leave us a review. Anybody who doesn't like the show, just send me a private message so I can improve it. But we really like 5-star reviews. This has been fun, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I
noticed you've got. Oh, is that the Adam Vinatieri snow kick behind you?
No, that is the Amendola during the AFC Championship game of 2010 when he caught the ball going over the end zone, and that actually belongs to our son Evan, but he came back home. And he says, we gotta have a place to hang this, Dad. I said, I maybe I can find a spot.
Yeah, we both have college kids back home right now.
I think it's great.
I do
think
too.
It's great.
I do too.
Enjoy it while you can.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
All right. Well, thank you. Take care, and
thank you,
we'll
guys.
have you on soon to talk about commercial real estate as well.
Happy to do it.
Music courtesy of the Eric Lindbergh Trio. Please visit his website at www.ericlindberghworld.com. Jennifer and Brian are licensed to practice real estate in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Brian is also a certified general appraiser in New Hampshire. They are not lawyers, accountants, home inspectors, or therapists. Real estate customs and rules may be different in your area. Each Keller Williams Realty office is independently owned and operated. The realtor name is trademarked to members of the National Association of Realtors. If you are currently under contract with a real estate agent, this is not intended as a solicitation. Views expressed on this podcast by Jennifer may not be shared by Brian and vice versa, nor are they necessarily the views of Keller Williams Realty.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21, Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.